Good afternoon. It is
Good afternoon.
3:01. Who do we have on the phone?
We have Ms.
Commissioner
Marshall.
Breitling is on.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Breitling.
I have Chuck too. I have
And
Chuck Henderson too.
thank you, Chuck. Okay, we will at this time call to order the Diversion Authority Land Management Committee, Wednesday, October 27th, 2021. Would you take a roll call, please, Don?
Mrs. Shirlene.
I am here.
Mayor Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Grubb.
Here.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mr. Borboom.
Here.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Here.
Mr. Olson.
Here.
Mr. Breitling.
Here.
Ms. Manjo.
Present.
Mrs. Preston. Mr. Zimmerman.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Okay. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. We don't have a lot of action items, but it's been quite some time since we've gotten together, and this land acquisition, of course, has been very, very busy, as I'm sure have all read about and heard about. So I will just go ahead and get started. You have the agenda in front of you. Are there any additions? Agenda. Eric, no? Okay, could I take a motion to approve?
Move approval. Campbell.
All those in favor say
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Minutes of the previous meeting, you've had an opportunity to review those. Could I get a motion to approve, or if there are any changes, let me know.
Olson approves.
Is there a second?
Second.
Breitling second.
Thank you, Commissioner Breitling. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
opposed, same sign. Very good. Then on to item number 4. Eric, you want to talk about the property acquisition status?
You bet. Thank you, Commissioner Shirlene. In the packet, and I'll share here on the screen, I'll scroll down, is our usual monthly status report. And while we haven't been meeting the last few months, we've still been producing this report. So hopefully you've had a chance to see that, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the general format. As usual, I like to spend a little time on the second page of the report, page 7 of your packet. This is your overall status map showing where we are with acquisitions. Of course, the channel is acquired. There's a handful of red shaded parcels there that are working through the eminent domain process. Chris McShane and others on the legal team are working on the hearings for those, which are scheduled to start early next year and proceed through the months of 2022. Including the green parcels and the red parcels, we're approaching 700 parcels acquired, so continue to make progress. A handful of parcels each month enter that status, and so we're, continuing to move forward. The color shading on the south end of the map, you can see a lot of the blues for Drain 27 wetland, some portions of the southern embankment that we're continuing to work on, as well as portions of the Red River control structure. Those are probably the 3 most active areas right now. The tan shaded parcels in the upstream area, those are related to the flowage easements. We've been continuing to work on the flowage easement study. I'll provide some more details on that in a little bit later. So this gives an overall snapshot. The next page is a map showing environmental monitoring easements. So as you're aware, we've been working to acquire these. Both the Cass County Joint Board and the MCC-JPA have been working to acquire those easements for quite some time now. Made a lot of good progress and then kind of stalled out. Most recently, after some strategy discussions with the Corps and with both the Joint Board in North Dakota and the MCC-JPA Board, decision was made to offer an incentive, a signing incentive to people who have not signed, as well as those who already signed. And so the land agents are out visiting with property owners, talking about that incentive, and the paperwork is being processed, and we're following up with that shortly. So I guess we're seeing a little bit more success on closing the acquisition of the remaining environmental monitoring easements, although I suspect we're going to continue to have some challenges there. The remaining pages of the report drill in more detail, diversion channel, southern embankment. You can see some progress being made. I guess I would note this report was produced a little over a week ago, and since that time frame, we have gone to the Cass County Commission and asked for permission to utilize an eminent domain action for Drain 27 parcels. And so next month, you'll notice that these blue parcels, I think the majority of them will be triggered into a red classification. Other sections of the southern embankment, upstream area. So I guess I'll maybe just pause there and see if there's any comments or questions, but that's the monthly status report in a snapshot.
Questions? So, Eric, are we going to be able to stay on time for the core work?
Yeah, we are. Obviously, that the Corps has provided a variety of deadlines. As I mentioned earlier, the sort of target areas or the target projects that we're working on very actively now are Drain 27, the Red River Control Structure, and Southern Embankment Reach 2A. And so we've got a handful of parcels acquired for each one of those. We've got some negotiations that are ongoing, and we've started some of the eminent domain actions where the time frame required us to on Drain 27. So we are staying on schedule with the Corps' requests, and Red River Control Structure is out for bid right now, and so the Corps is actively soliciting contracts for that, and in order for them to open those proposals, we need to have and certify the real estate. And so that certification to the Corps is due mid-November, and so we're working to shore up all the loose ends. There was a court hearing earlier this morning on one of the Minnesota parcels to sort of demonstrate necessity. So, yeah, taking the actions necessary to stay on schedule.
Okay. Years ago, I guess my understanding was that once we got going, we'd start the project on the north end, work our way south. That would be the P3 side, and then connect with the control structure. But now, as we've kind of turned that corner, my understanding is that really there'll be a lot of things happening all at once. I mean, I-29, for example. So there's a lot of need to really secure the land all at once, really, in a sense. And maybe you could expound on that. Has this particular developer now changed any of that we kind of took for granted in the past?
I guess I can answer some of that from maybe a real estate perspective, and I think there's probably some other folks that may want to talk about the expected construction schedule of the channel. But on a real estate perspective for the channel, we were, I guess, asked, and it was determined that we needed to have all the land for the channel before the final RFP for the P3 developer was out on the street. And so that was really setting the time frame to get the lands acquired for the channel. And as I understand it, the feedback through the RFP process from the developers was having all of the land in hand provided them a bunch of certainty as they were putting together their bids. If we were to only have a portion of the land available when they were putting their bid forward, that would have increased their risk exposure of where they were able to work, and so that would have jacked up their prices. And so from that standpoint, we were directed to get all the land for the channel prior to the RFP issue, and so that's been done. And then now that land is available, I think my understanding is the full notice to proceed for the developer is shortly forthcoming. getting a head nod from Paul on that, so shortly forthcoming. And once they have the full notice to proceed, then they take full control over the channel, the lands for the channel. And so that process has already started to transition. And then once they do that, I guess they have some procedures they need to go through with design reviews and approvals. But essentially, it's their job then to get construction started, and they have the latitude to work here, everywhere, depending on how they see fit. So perhaps Paul or others can talk more specifically about their expected contracts or construction schedule. And I think some of that's probably still fluid. On the southern embankment portion of the project, that's being done and being designed by the Corps in reaches or segments. And every time the Corps has a 65% design of any one of those segments, they provide us real estate drawings. Those real estate drawings tell us exactly what's needed for their construction of that reach. And so then we hire appraisers and we get negotiations and we start with the acquisition process for that reach. And so we started on SC1, Southern Embankment Reach 1. Well, I should back up. We started on the diversion inlet structure, then the wild rice control structure, then Southern Embankment Reach 1, Red River control structure, Drain 27, Southern Embankment Reach 2, Southern Embankment 2B, so on and so forth. And so those will continue to be progressed as the Corps continues designing and producing enough detail in their design that they're able to deliver a definitive real estate drawings for us to proceed. And so the Corps will continue to work in segments, but the diversion channel will be, I think, probably, my understanding is construction in multiple locations at once.
And there he is, Paul. Do you have something to add?
No, Eric did a really good job explaining that, especially the lands for the P3 developer and the reduction of risk there. I think that was reflected in their bids and in their process. One of the points of the notice to proceed is an updated schedule, which we are working through right now. Hopefully we'll be able to get that next week, and we're anticipating a notice to proceed on the design side here in the next, probably within the next few weeks, maybe I would hope at the latest by mid-November. But that's based upon them hitting certain milestones and hitting certain requirements. So ball's in the developer's court to get that done as soon as they can. What we have seen from their schedule, though, as Eric said, is that they are going to hit this full steam ahead. They're at some of the schedules show roughly in the second and third year of construction, potentially up to 20 to 25 different construction sites ongoing up and down the channel. So they're going to be looking at doing excavations starting at the north end and then working their way south, estimating about 6 to 7 miles a year of excavation, and then trying to stay ahead of that with the construction of their structures, including the aqueduct structures, which are the longest on there. So you will see construction, especially on the Maple River Aqueduct early on, and then in the County Road 81, I-29 area, and then also the outlet structure to start with. But there will be a lot going on up and down the entire channel over the next 4 to 5 years.
Anyone else? Roger?
Eric, would you explain the properties now that are in eminent domain? Quick take. Explain now the process going forward for these property owners.
Yes, so, unfortunately, we have to consider an eminent domain action from time to time. And once we've, in the quick take statute anyway, the Water Resource District, I'm talking about North Dakota here because that's where most of the action is, but once the Cass County Joint Water Resource District has permission from the county board to file the eminent domain action, then there's a deposit made in the amount of the last written offer. That deposit is made with the clerk of court, and that establishes what's called a date of taking. Once that date of taking is established, and which is different than the date of when the original appraisal was done. So that date of taking is established, and I think we've been directed to try to continue to negotiate all along, even after we filed, to the extent that we can. But one of the key steps then for the project is to order a new appraisal. So again, and because it's called a quick take, but it really takes almost a year from the time we start to the time we're able to deposit those funds. And so, a lot can happen in a year, and down in this Horace area, we've seen that as well. So we establish a date of taking, we order a new appraisal. The appraiser then at that point looks at the market data and does their job of assigning the market value as of that date of taking. And so if there's changes in the market from a year ago to today, presumably they would be reflected in that updated or new appraisal. And so then that's one of the key steps in the sort of process as you go through the eminent domain. So the new appraisal is done, and perhaps that serves as another option or step to continue to negotiate with the property owner. The property owner may have produced their own appraisal or may not, but they may get an appraisal if they haven't already. And then further in that process, it's called discovery. And I guess I'm probably talking a little bit outside of my headlights here, but discovery is, the process where our attorneys ask the property owner for a bunch of information, and the property owner's attorneys ask us for a bunch of information, and they whittle down what's really important, and they look at each other's files and determine what's going to be considered as part of the trial. And then ramping up to the actual trial, there's probably some perhaps depositions, and then the actual trial date. And so each one of those sort of key milestones, the appraisal, the discovery, the trial prep, and then the actual trial itself, generally serve as off-ramps maybe for the eminent domain process, and serve as a step in the process where we might realistically reach some type of settlement or potential negotiation. I know with the joint board, we've had a number of these negotiations or eminent domain actions that have been filed, and I guess I don't know the number, but I know there's certainly a good handful that have been settled after the eminent domain action was filed. And so that could be because we've got new evidence, we've got new facts, we've got some other reason to settle, and so the joint board's been having some of those executive sessions to consider those types of actions. So hopefully that provides a little bit of a summary of the anticipated path forward.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
I just got a question for Eric. I'm glad we brought that up, because I was just going to ask how they were going to do that reappraisal. Do you know, like in the process right now, like say from today, when they will do that reappraisal? Because I'm just trying to get an idea. Obviously, there's a lot of consternation in Horace about this because of Drain 27 and what's going on down there. Yep. And so I'm just trying to get some ideas as to when they might be able to anticipate that reappraisal, because obviously land prices have gone up down there substantially here, even over the last 3 years, but even in the last year.
Yep.
So as I just want to try and get an idea when we might be looking at that. Thank you.
So specifically regarding the new appraisals for those parcels around Drain 27, we've reached out to the appraiser that did the original appraisal report for the project and asked them for an updated timeline on when they could get the new appraisals done. We haven't heard that feedback yet. Hopefully I'm not sticking my foot in my mouth here, but I'm hoping that probably within 3 months, 2 to 3 months, we should have those new appraisals back.
Thank you. Anyone online have a question?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. The new appraisal, if it's larger in sum than the original appraisal, will result in an increased deposit with the district court. If in fact there is an increase in the appraisal, that information goes back to the joint board, and the joint board authorizes that type of payment.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Commissioner Breitling.
Good point.
Thanks for adding that. There is a deposit that is placed based on the current appraisal with the court, and as you said, that can be changed based upon a new appraisal.
And when is that deposited money available to the landowner?
My understanding is they can request those funds once they're deposited, and I think we have to sign off to allow them to have them, but I don't know that we would ever stand in the way, is my understanding. So
But it is a request from the landowner.
John's going to maybe correct me. So.
Mr. Shockley, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the court. It's been a while since I've litigated in court, but typically the deposit is usually available to the landowner about 24 hours after the deposit because the clerk of court takes a little time to process it. The landowner, they just have to prove to the clerk of court that they're the proper party and everything, and then they're permitted to withdraw it right away.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Eric, for item number 4. Now let's go on to item number 5.
Yeah, item number 5 here, I know we haven't met in a few months, and so I thought it would be prudent to maybe just provide the group with an update on a variety of the key items that we've been working on. So no action needed here, but certainly happy to answer any questions if you have any, or take some direction if you have that as well. The PRAM, as we know it, and maybe you've heard the term PRAM, it's the Property Rights Acquisition and Mitigation Plan. So a big book, you've probably seen us talk about that in the past. Version 4 is still the basis for the DNR's permit. Version 5 has been approved by the North Dakota Office of State Engineer, which is now the Department of Water Resources. But both version 4 and version 5 are a bit outdated in that they don't reflect the final permit conditions from either state agency and some of the knowledge we learned through the contested case hearing. And so we've been working on updating the PRAM to version 6. And now that we're through, I should mention the settlement agreement as well. Now that we're through the permitting, or at least the bulk of the permitting, the contested case hearing, and the settlement agreement, we feel like the mitigation plan is pretty well established. And so we're working on a process to produce version 6, which will also be sort of reorganized to have a sort of a more traditional report flow to it, so it flows from beginning to end and is a little bit more time tested, where in the past the mitigation plan was kind of a cobbled together plan with a bunch of individual pieces and parts. The content of the version 6 will largely remain the same, but the format of it will be updated so that it flows a little bit easier, and the permit agencies and all of us are, sort of easier reading document, I guess, is part of the goal.
So does that include Minnesota's side too, or is that a separate?
The PRAM addresses both North Dakota and Minnesota. There are some subsections that specifically address Minnesota and some subsections that specifically address North Dakota, but it's intended to be sort of one comprehensive document with those individual parts to it. And so that's been a big effort. We just had some review meetings, staff level review meetings earlier this week, and we have another one scheduled for Friday, and looking forward to getting that version 6 in a form that we're comfortable sharing it with the state agencies and of course the committee here. And so looking forward to doing that here this fall. And again, from a content standpoint, I guess the expectation is that no major content changes other than what we've learned, again, through the contested case hearing, some of the commitments through the settlement agreement, sort of shoring up those pieces and putting them into that one mitigation plan.
So are the details settled, for example, flowage easements and? the finer points on it?
Yeah, there are certainly details that are, like the flowage easement study, the valuation, the sample flowage easement. A lot of that information has been established and will be included and or referenced in this mitigation plan. And so we're, been working on the flowage easements, of course, to get that moved along. That's maybe the second point I would talk about here. But yeah, so I think we are further along. There are other parts of this mitigation plan that reference, for example, post-operation. So after the project may operate, we know that there's going to be some debris scattered here or there, or I guess maybe we don't know that, but we anticipate there may be debris scattered some places, and we've committed through the mitigation plan and then committed through the settlement agreement to help clean up that debris. And the exact details of how that actually gets implemented is something that's not fully defined yet. So that's still, we have some work still to do on those things, but the mitigation plan does sort of reaffirm those commitments and shares our intent to comply with those requirements, whether they're permit requirements or settlement agreement requirements.
Great. Anyone have any questions on the PRAM? Anyone online? Then let's talk about the flowage easement valuations. That's the next big thing. Yeah. And we don't need, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't need to get those secured real fast, but we need to get them secured before we need to use it. Right. So just a bit of lead up here. So Crown Appraisals was originally hired back in 2018 to do what we called a phase one study, which was more of a desktop market analysis to see if there was market data available. They've concluded there is market data available. They gave a nice presentation to the committee back in 2018. And then we had them update that phase one study into what we called phase 1B in 2020. And then earlier this year, we authorized them to start on phase two, which was basically building on the background information in phase one and 1B and applying those findings to the specific properties that are impacted by our project. And so they've been continuing to work on that appraisal assignment. They're focusing on the tillable land right now in phase two. So there'll likely be a phase three for non-tillable lands, but the 500 plus parcels that are tillable are the focus of phase two. Crown is expected to be done with those valuations by the end of the year. And our team, I guess, with the review appraisal and then those actual appraisal reports will be shared with the joint board and the MCC-JPA board for review and approval, and then offers will go out early next year. We are working towards scheduling some probably, I guess the details of this are forthcoming, but looking to have some type of maybe like a week-long open house where we would have people, land agents, experts available for a set time and place for a period of time where property owners would have their offer letter, their appraisal, and they could come in and visit and maybe get some more information. So we know that there's a lot of questions out there about what a flowage easement is. So the appraisal team has been out meeting with property owners, having all sorts of conversations with those property owners, trying to share information, gather information about existing conditions and whatnot. Looking forward to having that done late this year, and those offers started. We do need to acquire the flowage easements before the project operates, but our goal is to have them acquired before the last piece of construction on either state starts. And so the goal is to have them essentially acquired by the beginning of 2025. There'll be some construction that continues to occur after that time frame, but the goal would be to have them acquired by early 25. Has there been communication with landowners on how phase one was assembled and how it was determined, the process, and because it was very extensive, and I believe NDSU was involved in that as well, and Crown Appraisals, and
right.
They went across the country to look at other projects.
Yeah, there's a dedicated portion of the project website that deals specifically with flowage easements. And there's all sorts of good information on there. I know we've shared that web link with property owners. The appraisal team has been out sharing that information with property owners as well. There's an educational video. There's the sample flowage easement. There's videos of the Phase 1 and Phase 1B presentations, copies of those reports. And so we've made that all very much available. I suspect some property owners have dug in and read every word, and others probably haven't bothered touching it at all. And so I suspect we have kind of a wide spectrum there, but certainly made I think a pretty good attempt to share as much of that information as we can.
So this question maybe would be better go to Roger. This is a public outreach thing, and, are you folks talking about how this information gets out ahead so it can make everybody's life go a little smoother, including landowners, and having them have an understanding of really what happened? Because I appreciate everything that's on that website, but man, when I've gone there to try to find something specific, I just throw up my hands and call Jason Benson or Joel or you or somebody. And, I just think for the average person, there's just so much information. It's difficult. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think working with Crown Appraisals and Eric and his team to put together some public meetings for information will be supported. I think that'd be a great way
I think that would be really good.
Because that one-on-one means a lot, and where you can ask questions and get it hopefully answered.
I might just jump ahead briefly on our agenda to two separate items. 5E is Lands Director, and Joel may want to talk a little bit about this as well, but hopefully you're all aware Lands Director is starting on Monday, and of course one of the things we're going to ask her to solve for us is helping with the outreach strategy and strategy for offerings on flowage easements, among other things. And so we're working on some onboarding materials, and I guess I certainly have identified what are the sort of key challenges that we're facing either now or anticipate facing shortly. And I think having the Lands Director on board will be really important as we advance those issues.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I'll just make a little note too. So Miss Jody Smith will be starting on Monday. So Eric and I have been working diligently to come up with an orientation schedule for her, including face-to-face meetings with all of you. And so we'll get those kind of scheduled within the next month. Obviously, given the size of this lands program, it's a lot to take in for somebody new coming from the outside. So our goal is to get her up to speed as quick as possible. And one of the intents of that position was to harness my office with engineering director and communications director and bring all those folks together to tackle items like landowner communication and things that have kind of been siloed somewhat within the program for quite some time, and kind of integrate all those things together. So I'm not expressing that things will change tomorrow, but I think we have a plan in place to address some of those issues and put a process in place to correct them or make them better. And so we are looking forward to Jody starting. Just another note, Commissioner Sherling, we at the public outreach meeting, we previewed some of the changes to the website. And so that you're absolutely right. Right now, it's a large database of information, not as easy to navigate and find the things that you want. But I think some of the changes that we're showing today, we're making some progress, and we'll clean up that website and make it easier to find. There is information about flowage easements on the website right now, and it is in the newer format, so it's a little bit easier to digest and take that in. But yeah, we're certainly working on the issue for sure.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions about flowage easement? I have just one more quick question. Will the acquisition of flowage easements follow a similar procedure to acquire lands?
Yes and no. We are anticipating that we will not be using the quick take statute for flowage easements. Rather use if we have to, use a sort of standard or traditional eminent domain process for flowage easements. So again, hopefully we're able to negotiate everything voluntarily, but that's probably a big hope. So we'll see what happens. But so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to cemetery mitigation.
Yeah, cemetery mitigation. I know the committee has been interested in that in the past. There's a group of staff that are developing a cemetery mitigation policy that's basically taking the commitments that were outlined in the settlement agreement and adding some more details to those, incorporating the analysis that was done years ago by the Corps of Engineers and some of the studies they've done on historical impacts on historical cemeteries and things. And so there's 6 cemeteries that now have varying degrees of impact from the project, and then 2 other cemeteries that have viewshed impacts. So basically they're close enough to where construction is going to occur that you need to, from a historical perspective, need to consider, or from a cultural perspective, need to consider those impacts as well. I think probably the furthest, the cemetery that's one of the most impacted is the Clara Cemetery in Minnesota. It's near Comstock, and that's probably the furthest along in the development of a solution. So I know Chris Bakkegaard and others have been meeting with the Clara Cemetery folks, and they're working towards a solution that will satisfy the cemetery board as well as comply with the requirements of the settlement agreement. And so there's some good advances being made there. We have visited with a couple of the other cemeteries as well, and so there's work ongoing. And so I guess maybe I'd pause there. I don't know if Chris, if you have any more details you wanted to share, but I guess just at a minimum wanted to let the group know that we are making some progress in that regard. So.
Thank you. Questions about cemeteries? Anyone online? Any questions about cemeteries? So one quick question I have, Eric. Years ago, I had a conversation with the Corps, and they had a team here that really documented the cemeteries. It was pretty impressive work, I think, and discovered things that people, abandoned plots and on old farmsteads. Very, very interesting work that they do. Are they involved in any of this now, or is that, now that everything's been identified, or do they step away?
The Corps is very much involved. Their cultural folks are very much involved with the cemetery investigations, and in fact, they are planning to do what's called ground penetrating radar, GPR, on a couple of the cemeteries to identify if there's any unmarked graves, which admittedly is a little creepy for me, but apparently that's a common practice. And I know when we were visiting on site with one of the cemeteries in Richland County, the Corps folks were there, and they talked about doing the ground penetrating radar to identify those unmarked graves. And the cemetery group was really pleased to hear that. Obviously, they don't want to be impacted by the project, but they were really pleased to know that they could identify where there might be unmarked graves. And so I think that's generally viewed positively by the cemeteries, and it's another step that the Corps involvement is including. So.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on cemeteries? Anyone online? Okay, let's talk about the farmland management for next year.
Yeah, as part of the transition of, I guess each fall, we've been doing one-year lease agreements, and those are handled by the Cass County Joint Board as well as the MCC JPA Board. And so each fall we have our farmland manager out visiting with those producers and offering to rent the farmland for this upcoming spring. And so that process is ongoing right now. When we do that, of course, we want to make sure that we're not renting something that's going to be turned into a ditch or a levee or wetland or whatever. And so we work through the design channels to make sure we're renting the right parts and pieces. And as part of that, this year, as we're transitioning most of the channel lands over to the P3 developer, they have their own farmland management company, which is different than our farmland management company. And I think there's good reasons why they're two separate and different. And so that work is ongoing right now, outreach to the producers who have been renting our lands, getting those leases signed up for next year. The farm economy, I guess Roger can maybe comment. It seems like, there was maybe some down periods, but it seems like it's maybe a little bit stronger right now than it has been. Sense of things. And so I think, that bodes well for our rental process as well. People still want to farm our land. So.
And has that been received well so far?
I think so. I know I was just talking to Chris earlier. There was, there's always going to be some disruption anytime you've got a construction project overlapping with farming areas. And so we're trying to, I think, mitigate those impacts to the extent we can. And Roger talked, of course, about drainage. And I think earlier this summer you would have begged to worry about drainage issues. And now here we are actually worrying about drainage issues. But so I think we're trying to mitigate those impacts to the extent we can. The areas where the developer is responsible for renting lands in the channel, those areas are going to be delineated so that the farmer knows he's renting this portion of the field to the developer, and the joint board may own the remnant piece, the other part of that field. So we're working through those, and there's been a fair amount of communication back and forth with the property owners on that. So.
Do you have anything you want to add, Roger? Okay. Any questions for anyone? Okay, then item 5E was the lands director. I don't know that we have anything else to add to that. Then let's talk about item 6, crop insurance focus group.
As you may recall, one of the commitments from the mitigation plan and more particularly from the settlement agreement was that the authority is going to offer some supplemental crop insurance programs for producers in the upstream mitigation area. So we have a general framework of how that's supposed to be laid out. We've included some of that information in the public meetings we had in July. But of course, the farmers around here are experts in crop insurance, and they had a lot of detailed questions. And so one of our commitments coming out of those meetings in July was to establish some more details of the program, the crop insurance programs. One of the challenges we have is that we don't intend or need to have that crop insurance program actually in place for 5 years from now when the project is operational. And so we know we can develop some more details, but we can't actually get an underwriter to even care about it, frankly, for another 4 years. And so one of the things we're doing in the midterm here is we've arranged a focus group. So we've identified a small handful of producers in the upstream area that farm land that are, we know they're impacted. There's a couple that farm land both in and out of the impact area. And we're inviting them to a focus group meeting with our crop insurance development expert. That meeting's going to be late in November, and really trying to, drill into some of the nuances, ask some detailed questions, make sure that the programs we develop are meeting the expectations of the producers, but also staying within the sideboards that were outlined in the settlement agreement. So I think that's a good advancement. I've been working closely with Roger and Joel and Chris on that as well. So.
Great. Wonderful. Anyone else? Any questions? Then item 7, relocation benefits, informational meetings.
So one other area that, again, this is probably an area that we'll try to engage Jody Smith on, the lands director, is we know that there's about 70 rural residential property owners in the upstream area that will need to be, well, there's a handful of those that perhaps we can come up with a mitigation solution to let them stay in place. But the vast majority of those are going to be buyouts and displaced property owners, which makes them eligible for relocation benefits. Generally, people understand the purchase side of the equation, where I buy your property and you get cash and move on. But because it's a federal project, we also offer and we're required to provide relocation benefits. And so those are things, including moving costs, which again is pretty straightforward and people generally understand that. But then there's also parts of the relocation program that are a little bit more complicated and maybe a little bit more challenging to understand. And so we've had a number of questions from property owners, and we've been encouraged to develop a informational meeting targeted at those people who may be displaced by the project. And so we're working to establish a time to do that informational meeting. We were going to target later in November, but I think probably going to slip that into mid-December if we can. Again, looking to share as much information as we can with property owners who are displaced, try to provide some consistent information, explain some of the programs that we have, and answer some questions. The challenge in doing that, of course, is everybody's situation is unique, and so trying to provide enough examples that apply to most situations. But if we get a lot of one-off questions, we'll have to just take those in an individual basis. But so anyway, looking forward to doing that. And again, that's another thing where I think we'll work with Joel and Jody and all of that team to help frame that out. So.
Very good. Any questions? Then Roger, you want to give us an update from the Cass County Joint Board?
Sure, quickly. At our last meeting, we had land agent reports, and they reported on their activities and the difficulty in negotiating sell to horse because of land values and the difference in appraisal versus counteroffers. But they continue to work through those. And also we approved, I believe it was about 5 RHDP residential housing differential payments to landowners that are being displaced. And also looked at updating appraisals. Like I talked, there was some of these appraisals have gone a year or even a year and a half. So we know there's been a lot of activity out there and a lot of things that have affected the land values. So we actually looked at updating one of the properties, updating the appraisal, but we're encouraged to wait until the Corps gave us exactly what we needed. So the what do you call that, Eric?
Probably the work limits or the
the work limits, so that the appraisal would reflect the land that we're actually looking for. So I think we delayed that until December on one of those, and then we had a couple of property owners that one spoke directly with us and another through his attorney, and so we listened to what their plea was on the value of their land, and so we continue to have landowners coming forward just about every meeting to discuss their situation. That would be about it. So we're actually looking forward to the flowage easement study, so that we can start putting that together. And I know the land agents are definitely looking forward to that, to see where we go. And also the environmental easement That's been a problem, and I think the biggest thing is price and how long people are asked to give up this right for this environmental easement. So I think that we'll continue to work with landowners and the land agents to arrive at something that works. So these are important to the project. We can't just say, hey, we don't need that. I think the Corps has required us to get these, so we'll continue to negotiate and hopefully meet the landowners' expectations. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Roger? Then Kevin, you want to talk about the Minnesota side?
Sure. Thank you. We have been doing the same thing. We've been working with our appraisers on different land appraisals and relocation appraisals, as well as housing differential payment appraisals. We have authorized those, and of course that is the first step in moving forward with negotiations with landowners. Our focus recently has been on the two remaining properties that are needed for the Red River control structure. And there were 4 of them that were needed. 2 had been previously resolved. The third one, we did hold a special meeting of our MCC JPA last week, Eric? Last week? Yeah. And we did agree to a negotiated settlement on the third property. And the fourth one, going a little bit into some of the legal requirements involved with eminent domain. On the fourth one, our county board Tuesday morning authorized the deposit of payment on the value for the fourth property, and that I believe is being deposited tomorrow morning, and then it was go before the court on Friday. And it was our assumption then that we will have access to our legal needs for that property. And that property owner is not disputing the taking, they're disputing the valuation or the appraised value. And so we will continue to work on that. Our requirement was to deposit the appraised value with the court, and so that's being done. So hopefully the fourth property that we need on the Minnesota side for the Red River control structure will be done Friday. So I don't know, Eric, do you have any more on that?
That's right.
Is that considered quick take?
Yes, it's a different process in Minnesota than the recently changed one in North Dakota. It's actually much quicker in Minnesota to do that. So, which is surprising for Minnesota, if I might put in my little personal.
Indeed. Anyone have any questions for Commissioner Campbell? All right.
Commissioner Shirley, I might add.
Commissioner Maggio?
Yes, thank you. The MCC JPA page on the Clay County website has been revamped to make it accessible and easier to navigate for the public. So for anyone watching, we did do that and also linked it to the Diversion page and the Buffalo Red Watershed page.
Excellent. Thank you for that update. Anyone else? Okay, then item number 10 is MetroCog. I don't know that we have anyone here from MetroCog, but it's a placeholder for future meetings. And then you have the update that we'll use tomorrow for the regular DA board. Is there any other business? Any other business from anyone online? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Aye.